In IBC 2017, we were told all of our broadcast infrastructure was going to be in the public cloud. Why aren't we?
There's just that one time, right, when you're there and you'll have, I don't know, the Tour de France, and it doesn't work. And who do you call? There isn't a number, right? There's no number to phone. People want people at the end of the phone. And the technology itself,
it's all going to be robots, Neil.
All going to be robots. We're not in the cloud yet. Certainly, we can't ignore the pandemic. However, in some ways, right, that accelerated what we could do in the cloud and people's ambitions. The challenge that we see today, we've got costs. It's expensive. You don't have any control of it, right? There could be some surprising bills that turn up. Compute capacity, it still has to be on somewhere. We're burning a lot of power. We're just giving the problem to someone else.
Offsetting your carbon credits.
Yeah, which, I'm just not a big fan of. We should all own up to what we use. I think the carbon offset it's just monopoly trading money, isn't it, of people. It's actually the people having the skills to be able to deploy it. If you start taking that power away from them, you don't get interested people looking after your content. Do I really want to get up, go and sit in a dark place in West London on 5 o'clock every morning, press some buttons and then go home again? Software, can you reliably access what you want, when you need it? And I don't think we've fully proven that. IP's not that hard, actually. IP's actually pretty easy. I can sound like Elon Musk, don't I? What is hard, it's the control plane to go around it. It's the software that goes around it. You realise that infrastructure is really where it's challenging still.
Are you optimistic about the cloud?
I'm optimistic about it, and I think we can put quite a lot up there. The challenges to solve can be solved once we get to the bottom of...
Today, I'm talking to our cloud-savvy broadcast engineer, and by the end of this episode, you will be on cloud 9 as you will be empowered by the answers you have found, so you can broadcast seamlessly like a gentle breeze through the cloud. You will know when you should spin up and spin down services like a DJ in the digital sky, and make every transmission a heavenly experience. Our guest has been working in the broadcast industry for more than 20 years. Basically my entire life. And he has in-depth knowledge of working with broadcast technology and experience leading a team of engineers. In fact, he is so passionate about media, he even has a side hustle, filming boxing matches. It's Neil Bernard.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to my lounge.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about cloud savvy, but I definitely have borne the wounds of living in the broadcast space in the last couple of years in the cloud, which, do you know what? It's really exciting. There are many people that got another 20 years on me in this industry, right? So I'm actually still quite young and junior in this, and even I feel like I've had a lifetime in this industry. But
as long as you feel young in here. No,
I do feel young in here, and do you know what? I've really enjoyed it, and I think it's been great to turn up at a time in our industry where it is such a change. And there has been, such a dynamic shift in the way we have to think about things. There's been a huge skill gaps for a number of years, which I think bringing people into these new technologies that we're here today, that they adapt to them far, far easier than we ever did when we were engineers. And there's still an expectation that, look, we work in telly, right? The technology is there to support making great television. And that has actually been something which, you have to be passionate about that, I think. But yeah, that's where I think we are with savviness in the cloud for me.
Well, we'll go in depth through this topic. This is the cloud-themed episode, so let's get straight to it then. Recap on where we was. In IBC 2017, we were told that all of our broadcast infrastructure was going to be in the public cloud. Why aren't we?
We've got to have a goal, I guess, right? We've got to have a target. We've got to be ambitious.
And just for context, it's 2024 now, if you're not watching this when it's posted.
With a couple of challenges, right? So IP's not that hard, actually. IP's actually pretty easy. What is hard, it's the control plane to go around it. It's the software that goes around it. It's actually the people having the skills to be able to deploy it. Certainly, we can't ignore the pandemic. However, in some ways, right, that accelerated what we could do in the cloud and people's ambitions, right, to be take more risks in the cloud or more risks in using infrastructure perhaps they hadn't been before. And we talk about the public cloud, right, but there's also the public internet. And the public internet is just one big, massive network where people can use it, decentralized. The things that people could do over the pandemic that were great. And it's building the expertise and the experience around using it, I think, and the technology that hangs off it that makes it usable.
I mean, if COVID wasn't there, we wouldn't have accelerated as faster.
I don't think so. I think it's there's a comforting factor to be where they in their comfort zone. At the end of the day, projects come along usually with very limited timescales, and you have to sometimes not take the risks you really want to take. Right? There's some projects I've been involved with which they've had the money and the time to do something truly transformational in space, but they are businesses that have some money right behind them, and they were able to lead in that. So during COVID, we had great conversation with a great OB provider. They could work from home, right? It was brilliant. They had traditional kit they'd sent out to their operators. They had it in their bedrooms, their front rooms, traditional broadcast kit as well, big vision switches, EVS consoles. And it worked really, really well. It worked really, really well. And they started to grow some confidence in that until they went for slightly bigger events and thought, yes, we've had completely nothing for 6 months. It's been brilliant. And I think that day when they did some big major event, I think one of their operators lost power to their street and the other ones lost broadband to their street. And suddenly, suddenly the decentralized sort of operation of COVID meant that you realise that infrastructure is really where it's challenging still. And COVID accelerated the thinking, though, the risk, and also it provided opportunities, right? So that people could start to build decentralised areas that are more across the country where people could go. We've got better power, better connectivity, but you're still doing a remote operation or a REMI operation. I think we're not in the cloud yet because it's quite complex to get the video plane up there, the amount of data. Control's good, right? We've got control, that's pretty reliable, but definitely video, definitely the skills to support it. And let's face it, the real humdinger about the cloud, right, and about infrastructure is the costs. That is literally the big humdinger. It's expensive, right? And the problem is that no one really knows how expensive. When you run your own infrastructure, you've got some control over your costs and you might not like them. And fundamentally, the cloud probably will be a better place to be from that in the longer term. But you don't have any control of it, right? And I think that's the challenge that we see today. We've got costs, people, software, all of these complex things.
The cost is a tricky one because, of course, there's that whole pay-as-you-go aspect. That's use it when you need it. But what are the kind of challenges with that specifically?
It is quite tricky because, again, going back to the software stacks to spin stuff up to make it usable. We've spent a lot of time actually on building out orchestration systems and systems that will lay down infrastructure as code. And we're getting very good at that, right? We've got some really good examples where we're using it on-prem infrastructure and it's great. The problem is, though, is it's not even about public cloud, right? It's about what you've got on-prem to support the public cloud and just having it sitting there ready to sort of spin up. The costs are just sunk in latent CPU time that you're burning the environment with and not actually using what you want on it. And having some element of confidence that when you come to use it, it's just going to be ready to go and on. That's the challenge. People want to spin it up like 2 or 3 days in advance for major events when you've got every weekend anyway. So you're only really turning it off for a couple of days at a time, which can definitely save you some money. But the reality of it is you're sort of still not quite spin up, right? Because those software stacks around it need to be reliable. And like I say, we're making great waves into being able to make it reliable. But there's always today in Amazon, we tried to spin something up, but we actually didn't quite have the reserved instances available in that region that we needed. And that has happened, right? And people can't be worried about that. They've got people coming in, they've got an event to manage, they need to switch it on, it needs to work. And we haven't got there yet, I don't think.
What kind of use cases do you think would work in that regard? If you're spinning stuff up every weekend.
I think sports is a great use case, right? You want 3 hours on a Saturday at 3:00, and that's when you want to spin up. But that's also when you have your peak demand, right? Weekends, you've got lots of spin up you need at the weekends all at the same time. And to be honest, I think even when it comes down to infrastructure, you still need the people to operate it, right, at that time. And transitly having people just available at 3:00 on Saturday for 3 hours. So great use cases are graphics for sport. You've got graphics operators that they're trying to achieve remote operations at sporting events. They send a little van and they'd have people do the graphics. That's great. To try and do that remotely is really the aspiration. And I think that is a great use case where it can work, because they are more simpler processes, I think, that get spun up for production. And I think they're a bit more deterministic. And I think that is something that can be there, but you still need connectivity to these grounds. And also, certainly from a production journalistic point of view, it's quite tricky, I think, to be truly making television when you're not really sapping up the atmosphere of what you're trying to achieve at the event, right? Formula One's a really good example of that. They've got great remote operation and they do really well. And actually, it does make a lot of sense for them. But the event itself, that drives some innovation. We've got innovation of driving the remote, but being there, being part of that event, being part of that sporting community, the people you meet on site, it's definitely what makes that a valuable essence of being there. And spinning up something to support that is quite tricky when you've got multiple elements to deal with on the technology side. It's very interlinked with people, technology, I think. Still, it's where ebb and flow.
It's always about the people.
It's always about the people, and many of our customers now, especially here, I think we're selling people. We're still selling people. People want people at the end of the phone, and the technology itself.
It's all going to be robots now.
All going to be robots. It's all going to, and unfortunately, fortunately, we don't have many robots here, which is great. No, we have an awesome set of people that I think always have the best interests of your production in heart, right? And in fact, actually, sometimes we're fault here. Sometimes we'll definitely prioritise the customers, getting them on air to the detriment of anything else we do, because we really do value that, and I think our customers value the fact you can pick up the phone and get somewhere. We go back to the cloud. Why aren't we in the cloud? Well, again, going back to, there's not very many people we can phone up to help us in the cloud, right? That's not to say it's not very reliable. All the major cloud providers are extremely reliable, right? But there's just that one time, right, when you're there and you'll have, I don't know, the Tour de France, and it doesn't work. And who do you call? There isn't a number, right? There's no number to phone. There's you can have people there. You can have advanced support, of course you can. But you're going to get through to a whole strain of people.
I mean, anyone can relate to that when you go on any kind of customer service chat box and you're going through all these automated messages, and I'm just like, speak to someone, please. That's all I want.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I just put rubbish answers in the chat box because it confuses it so much that you hopefully get through.
I do that. Yeah,
which means there's no real value to the whole thing in the first place. It's not even, the cloud doesn't even have what you want at the cost you want it at. It's, can you reliably access what you want, when you need it? And I don't think we've fully proven that, to be honest. I don't think that's a fully proven workflow. The cloud providers are great. They really are. But I think that the reason we're still in a very traditional broadcast world for some of these events and some of what the infrastructure we put around it is because, we want control. And unfortunately, that is the case. We want to be able to assure that we can look at every element.
Guarantees.
And your job in engineer, which is what this conversation is all about, savvy in the cloud, your job in engineer, you start taking that power away from them. And I think you don't get interested people looking after your content. And I think that's a key thing. Going back to the remote operations and not being at the event, one of the cool things I did when I worked in outside broadcast was I loved going abroad. I loved travelling. I loved getting there. Do I really want to get up and go and sit in a dark place in West London on 5 o'clock every morning, press some buttons and then go home again?
Yeah.
Well, great. I've gone there, looked at some sport, pressed some buttons, but I've not been part of it. And I've not, what type of people are we going to have around those events?
Well, if you go back to the skills crisis, one of the things we have to do is make it appealing for people to want to work in this industry and want to be engineers, right? And if you're saying, I'm just going to a dark room and you're going to have to do night shifts or get over it,
it's not as appealing. I mean, you'll get people, and there's lots of people that are really good at that, and that's not a problem. We're not saying that it exists, but I think you definitely will not see the growth of talent. We have many engineering people that have started off in operations productions, right? They've been out to the events, they've done that, then they've moved into learning about the problems, learning about the technology. I think that skills gap thing is definitely an interesting thing. You bring people straight in with what's now more modern skills that we require, like networking and DevOps and software. If they haven't got the experience of making television, then I think it's a real challenge. And if really we're doing remote productions, which are really just a room connected to the cloud, to some systems that, yeah, okay, you know, you can definitely try and tell a story for sure. But if you're not part of the story at the other end, I think it's going to be quite tricky to appeal to people that are going to be interested in making that type of telly. Worked with people that are very much parts of those sports and then get into telly because they're parts of sports. And some of the most amazing directors we have, I don't quite know if they're just going to pop in off the streets now, you know, and try and learn it all from the comfort of a room. But then we've got a whole new generation of people, right? So maybe that is the answer. And I think, you know, the cloud has definitely supported that type of element, putting the systems in to be able to people to collaborate, which again goes around the communication of what we achieve.
Are you optimistic about the cloud?
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, it's like AI, right? It's not something that's never not going to go away. We've opened up a box and there's elements of it, and I'm optimistic about it. And I think we can put quite a lot up there. And I think that it is mindset change. So even all my opinions about where I think we've got challenges, and even those, I think they're challenges to solve that I think can be solved. And it's inevitable, right? It's like any utility service. We will have to use a utility service. Once we get to the bottom of how much does it cost, have we got influence over it and control over it? And until I think we have those questions answered, I'm not entirely sure yet when the cloud will become the 80-20, you know, 80% of what we do to 20% on-prem. Yeah. There's a long way off from there, I think. It's definitely going to happen, right? And we have to make that happen. But we talk about clouds, there's still the argument, and there's still a big argument about private and publics, right? We talk a lot about public, and many of our customers still want to see somewhat of a hybrid approach. And I don't know if that's a compromise that is just there for compromise's sake, an all or nothing approach. I think that's quite a tricky one, because going back to you want to build some private cloud, right, for people to use, you've got to basically make a huge investment as a provider, or yourself if you're self-hosting. And if you think, I'm just going to build some compute and maybe some software will turn up and maybe I'll stick it on there, sometimes it doesn't, right? And then you're just going to be burning some power cycles and some money on things that you hoped would turn up. And you spent a load of money on infrastructure, where the reality of it is if you'd have waited if you'd have taken the hit on understanding the prices in the cloud, then you might have gone a bit sooner, right, and maybe saved a bit less on that latent space, plus the people that look after it and all of that. It's really tricky space, I think, to be in.
When it comes to deploying in the public cloud, is this an efficient use of budget? And where does it kind of make sense to do so when you do deploy in the cloud and where you don't? You mentioned kind of hybrid approaches with private and public. What's optimal depending on what you're doing?
I think we've got to get better at understanding burst capacity or hybrid capacity, where we need the cloud to help us out during the times when perhaps, you know, it might be some demand that we didn't foresee or something that's more transient. From a business point of view, I think if we can show our customers that the ability to be able to burst in for temporary pop-up events or temporary DR capacity, then yes, you know, that's going to definitely shave a lot of money off us having to sit there with that capacity running just in case they need it. And certainly in the play-out space, which is, you know, our new space that we haven't yet got fully into the weeds with our customers and then how that's going to operate, but somewhat the pop-up nature of lots of on-demand platforms that our broadcasters have now, where they want to see some overflow from their main channels, concurrent sporting events where they've got rights for stuff that they can't quite get on all their main channels, but they want to pop it up into temporary space. I think that's where the business makes sense. And playout's a very interesting one for us, because that is very transient and occasional. And I guess I'm more optimistic about the cloud was one of your earlier questions. Well, I guess we have to be, really, because that has been, you know, that's our primary solution of building pop-up in the cloud. And I think that will work, because we still have the people, right? The people is still a key thing, and that's where we're still building managed service wraps around those. They're very much, I wouldn't say traditional, but we've definitely got a fairly traditional thing where people can turn up, see
traditional
people. Traditional approach in operating the platform, yeah, because again, people, eyes on, being able to react to scenarios. A lot of what we've been asked to look at is live events as well. So they have got a small production element to them, which at the moment very much does demand a person. I'm sure AI, machine learning in the next decade will perhaps challenge that. We're having a very different conversation.
Well, that's a whole debate in itself.
It is, but in answer to your question about the business side of that, I think the cash is easier for people to understand when... Is it easier to understand, though? That's I suppose, one of the questions. I think it's got the ambition of being easy to understand, occasionally use and spin up. But the reality of it is that when you've got more defined physical costs that you definitely have to pay, it's easier to put in a spreadsheet, divide it by the number of whatever it's going to be, and come up with a number that you can be more confident that you definitely have to pay that. When you're looking at occasional use space, you have to do some quite clever forecasting around what type of things you're going to deploy for people, how much that's going to be. There's lots of accordioning, people think that spin up means lots of flexibility. That is true, but the reality of it is you're really applying defined models to these, not necessarily tweaking every little knob, because that gets very complicated from a systems point of view. The cost of that can actually be quite difficult to predict, especially, with changing cloud prices. We haven't really seen that much yet, but in the near future, I can only see some turbulence in, we can think about something costs today, it could double, right, tomorrow if they choose to change the pricing. We don't know that, do we? So there's an interesting dynamic there as well.
Well, you don't have any control.
We don't have any control, exactly. I mean, I don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think tomorrow that we're going to have this problem, but it is a risk, right? And it is a risk that I don't think is completely mitigated. The costs aren't fully under control. You can buy reserve time, but then you get back to you're now spending money that you may or may not use. So you're back to the complications of not really realising temporary spin-up. And I think cloud providers have something very similar to what telcos have had for years. The challenge with telco is we have to think about always on peak demand for the most peak we ever need within our telco networks, which means that we just have to have a lot of bandwidth always on. And that's the same with cloud providers, right? They have to have a lot of compute capacity ready to rumble for when people want to use it. And the economics of that are quite difficult. And look, I'm very much a new man in the world of sustainability, and I am a completely changed opinion on how our environment impacts our technology. A few years ago, I probably was a bit sort of like, oh yeah, no, it's a thing, it's a marketing thing. It's not a marketing thing, right? It's a real thing, actually. And I generally believe, actually, we should be spending a lot more time in this area. That compute capacity, right? It still has to be on somewhere, and we're burning a lot of power somewhere, and we're not necessarily. We're just giving the problem to someone else, so we still have those challenges.
Offsetting your carbon credits.
Yeah, which I'm just not a big fan of. We should all own up to what we use. I think the carbon offset it's just monopoly trading money, isn't it? Of the environment. I think we just need to be better. But there's a cost to the environment, and do you think you can build a data center, an operating center that's more efficient than Amazon? Probably not, right? Because they spend tens of billions of pounds on these types of things. But I think if you look at the workloads assigned to them, and the control that you need, I still think, it's just not a clear answer, in my opinion, about where to sit.
There are a number of cloud providers. Is there any concern of being trapped in an AWS cloud? Because if you put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing, what if they just inflate the costs? What do you do?
I mean, it is a big strategic alliance, right? We spend a lot of money, and there's a lot of partnership agreements there that I think are going to be amazing. And we do have other cloud providers that we strategic partnerships with. I think in the media space, it has always made sense that AWS is there because they've spent a lot of time and effort in the media side. But having spoken to a few of our providers, other cloud providers it becomes more IP, it becomes less of a problem. And certainly with one particular vendor, actually, we had this discussion with the other week, they're quite comfortable deploying in multi-environments. But, yeah, do we feel we're going to get locked in? It's the risk of the cloud, right? It's like electricity bills. We've recently seen that. We've all been trapped at home. We've been trapped at home with electricity bills we simply don't have control of. The government can cap them as best they can. and the amount of time and money we spend with Amazon, particular, is going to be interesting. But they also bring a lot of expertise. I guess it's always compounded by other issues as well. Chip shortage being a really good example over the last couple of years through the pandemic.
Yeah, that
was a real challenge for us. We invested a lot of money to make sure we had the stock available, and we're still sitting on a fair bit of it right now. We'd like to think that is money well invested because we know we're going to spend that, but not having control over how much of that infrastructure you put in and can use, because we can adapt our own infrastructure to be more value engineered and more cost effective to try and get the costs and meet the cost demands. I guess, AWS are a great partner anyway. We can always talk to them. I'm sure that discussions could be had, and it's in their interest, right? If it starts becoming ridiculously expensive, then they know you're competing against people that can put the technology in anyway. I think they would be challenged as a business to provide anything to anybody, I would guess. But there could be some surprising bills that turn up right one day for some people, and I don't think we've got enough experience yet as to what they may be. I can only speak for the media space, where we're certainly still relatively fresh to seeing what these bills cost, and certainly a lot of strategic partnerships have gone in with lots of people, and I don't know if those costs are fully reflective yet. I don't know whether they're sort of starter costs in the industry, and as they start to understand them more, and people get a bit more settled in, and the bills start to make a bit more sense, whether they'll start going up a little bit. That is what we're going to have to see over the next couple of years, I think.
Why have we built an encoding and multiplexing platform, which we did for Digital 3 and 4, in a private cloud, but in our own data centers?
So that project went live about 18 months ago. And
what's the date?
Well, I can't remember the date, but it feels like a lifetime, actually. We spent, a good 18 months before that working on what from an application point of view, who are going to be the vendors. It's very much a hardware world in this space, right? We were literally going from there is been nothing anywhere near this big or anywhere. We were the first, and we were jumping straight into quite complicated technology. We had only really started our journey on the microservices type software solutions, and even then, that was something we sort of talk to ourselves every day. And we're like, wow, we're really pushing technology here. We could literally put some software on some servers that would work, but we want to build some microservices stuff because we think that's something we need to understand and learn. And I think the cloud just didn't have the capabilities at that scale. And to be honest, I still think it doesn't today. The D3 platform for us is a very large platform. It's a huge amount of encoders that run at any one time, well over 1,000. I don't think
the world's most complex system in the world.
It is. There is a quote from someone that says, it is the world's most complex code and muck system, and that's true. We've learnt so much from that, and we've driven our own innovation. Had we have just sort of sat and put some software on a server without the microservices, then I don't think we'd have learned anything. We'd never have moved forward. Certainly on our more DevOps skills, we'd never have built anything anywhere near as robust. And we're literally seeing the dividends of that now. Plout being a very good example. All of the things that D3.4 put in place are great for Plout, and that's a very cloud-driven project. So I think, we took there was a lot of risk in that previous project in terms of technology risk. And I think adding it to the cloud, which even then I think might challenge with the amount of capacity we need all the time that's running now, I think that's why we built that on-prem. Would we choose to build it in the cloud next time round? Maybe. Certainly. Again, going back to capacity, it's a lot. It's quite computationally expensive. I'm not saying they don't have it, but it's not proven to us that they do. It's quite a large scale as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite a tricky one, that, because you could argue the cloud is quite an interesting place to experiment because you can spin up something and see how it runs, but it's quite expensive to do that even for short periods of time. Again, we've seen that in a play out where we've done quite a lot of experimentation, and it's been very expensive to us to operate those experiments. Now, they're not efficient experiments. They're experiments to see what happens. We've looked at the cost and go, whoa. But they're also costs where we've gone, okay, right.
That's your engineer brain there.
It is.
Trial and error.
It's trial and error, exactly. Until you try it, it's very difficult to understand what it's going to cost. Would we choose to build that in the cloud today? Possibly. It's how are we going to run it for long enough to build confidence without burning what could potentially be hundreds of thousands of pounds for an experiment. One beautiful thing about owning your own infrastructure is you can experiment, right? If you've got a bit of capacity, you can experiment. It doesn't really cost you anything other than time and people. Now you want to answer a question and experiment, you've got to pay to use someone else's time to experiment. We see this in media workflows for file management. You want to play around with file formats and see what works and what doesn't. Actually, it's quite an expensive thing to run that experiment. Back in the old days, you'd sit there with your servers and a bit of spare time overnight and let it churn through. It doesn't really cost you anything. So that's something which people don't really see, especially from a commercial point of view. You've got a service, you've got something you're trying to build, brilliant. But all those little things that go underneath it, they cost money and they're not always captured in those costs. And until you start to run an operation fully cloud native, things can be quite tricky to see to predict those costs. And you've sort of got to take a bit of a bet on what you're going to do with those costs, really.
So we talked about the economics there. All this moving into the cloud, everything's new, get all the shiny new products, right? But people are still investing in what currently still works today in their existing workflows and in SDI. Why?
Well, number one, they've spent a load of money on infrastructure, right? That they want to get it back on stuff they've done.
Which you don't want to cut your losses.
Which you don't want to cut your losses. And of course, that they have to have all the product support around that. In a dying market, going back to the chip shortages, people have had to respin engineering boards. That's been quite tricky. But COTS, commodity off-the-shelf replacements for that, haven't been very commodity, right? They've been stuck in the same chip shortages. And it's somewhat worse because you really do need some enterprise-grade networking equipment around that to support some uncompressed workflows. And that's not been cheap. They are data center network switches with very complicated leaf-spine networks. Well, actually, the networks aren't that complicated. Actually, going back to IP is not that hard. But certainly very expensive because you need very high bandwidth ones. And even the incidentals around it, an SFP to connect into your network.
What's an SFP?
Oh, I see. So these are very...
I'm a marketer now.
Exactly. They're a very simple little gadget that allows me to connect an optical cable up to a switch in different formats, right? They've got a laser in them, effectively. And they can range from anything from 50 quid, right, for a simple one, to literally 16 grand each. And of course, we need the expensive ones. We need the 16 grand each ones, and we need a lot of them, right? And I think that's never quite been realised. SDI, certainly FPGAs that support that. So FPGAs are application-specific circuit chips that allow us to perform SDI type things. They still have. I still think they're a place. IP comes with, like I said before, a whole skill set thing. Back in the day, people could grow up. If you could learn how to plug the back of your telly up, you could probably learn a little bit about SDI video. If you could absorb that and understand television, which meant putting them in a support environment, you could grow into it. Nowadays in IP, you have to be quite, I wouldn't say expert, but you really have to know what you're doing, right? You do a lot of bad things very quickly, which means it's not as easy for people to learn to come up through the ranks. And broadcasters don't have an instant pot of these people to pull from at the moment.
There's no easy level; it's straight to hard difficult.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's very difficult because I don't see across the entire board of everyone. But certainly in my experience, to bring people in to be able to support these IP infrastructures on-prem, I think we are definitely on the sort of 20% of our industry probably have the ready skills. We've got many people who are going to be more than capable, but they're just not there yet. And people need to build stuff right now, right? They need to build stuff today. And building out very complicated IP on-prem networks, it's a lot easier just to say, SDI, I'm going to buy a big SDI switch. I'm going to put some very straightforward cables in. I don't have to worry about things like NMOS being the control plane that goes around IP or other technologies that are very similar. It's like having a cable, and now you've got to worry about security on a cable. There's all of these things to think about at a low level. And certainly for some of the smaller facilities, I can see why the cost of people, the cost of technology, they really don't make sense. SDI is a very reliable technology.
Well, if it's not broke, don't
Yeah,
fix
well,
it.
that's the interesting thing. I mean, it would be great to see actually what a table of IP versus ST. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Where we sit. I mean, there are definitely pros and cons, and there definitely are pros, right, for larger scale broadcasters where they've got multiple regional centres. There's a big broadcaster that we probably all know about that has very large facility in West London and one out in Amsterdam and all over Northern Europe and America. And yes, I can see why IP works really well for them.
Yeah.
Your localised newsrooms in the UK, though, I mean, I still think they are still very much production driven, and SDI I still think has a place, especially in lightweight monitoring, where you still got to get a cable to a monitor. You burn ports on networks, which is very fast as well, and the network ports are very expensive. SDI ports are probably a lot cheaper. And yes, we come back to sustainability. Spinning up a lot of IP infrastructure to support what SDI what's replacing SDI is power, probably 3 or 4 times more, I think.
I don't know if this is a good analogy. This might be terrible. But it's like, if I use my wired earphones, well, I'm just charging my phone. But if I use my Bluetooth AirPods, then I have to charge my AirPods and my phone. I don't know if that's a good analogy.
I think it's a great analogy. There's a lot more technology and things to go wrong in a Bluetooth. But are they convenient? Absolutely. I mean, are they reliable? Yeah, they're pretty reliable, right? Until you get on the train with a bit of interference and it knocks out your Bluetooth connection to your phone, right?
Yeah.
And like you say, you've now literally gone from a bit of power, moving a magnetic coil in your ear, to now having to power a low power radio link, and the amplifiers in the headphones. And I think, I don't think earphones are going to totally burn our planet in what they're going to use, but definitely.
You get the point. Yeah.
I think it's a good example, and I think we were too quick. We are too quick to drop technology, which in our industry, going back to some people, we just want to make content, right? Content providers. We want to make good content for people, and technology shouldn't be getting in the way.
Technology should be helping, and when the technology is not there. But then some people, they need to try. You need to have those trailblazers so the technology 100%. Develops, so that way everyone can have it good and at a lower price.
100%.
If I think about all those Atari video game consoles, and I think that was like more than what the PlayStation 5s of today cost back then, and I think who was paying like $2,000 or whatever it was? I don't know, but they're paying like £2,000 for free games.
Oh, we're really lucky. Okay, so we've got lots of innovators in this industry. What's been really interesting actually is, look, I'm very much I would provocatively I would say that some of the organisations like SMPTE, the VSF. I'm a little bit like, well, I'm a jobbing engineer, and it's great that these guys exist to build innovation, to set standards, but I'm just the guy that just needs to turn up and use it, right? I trust that someone has done the homework, and someone's turned up to me and said, like, build a TV studio, okay, right, okay, great, right, what do you want to do in it? I'm going to do some news content, right, let me focus on that. The low-level electrical standards and IP standards of how these things plug together, I assume the SMPTE have dealt with that. That was always how I've worked. Now, obviously, over the years, I've become a lot more engaged with those type of organisations. And what's really interesting now is actually, especially people like SMPTE, they're really reformatting themselves, right? The intake from our younger people into the industry has been amazing. There's some new innovation people there that I think are going to grow those innovations. Not saying I don't think I'm an innovative thinker, but I do think of myself as a jobbing engineer. I am very much what's the problem we have today?
Well, you can't focus on everything. You can't be a man who has to worry about the world's problems.
No, there's much smarter people that they can worry about the bigger broadcast industry. I mean, it'd be great if we were a bit more glued up from bottom to top, because I very much grew up through. I mean, SDI, I think, when I started in broadcast engineering, I think SDI had literally only been invented like 4 years earlier. It was sort of ready, and it sort of worked. And I lived in an SDI world for 20 odd years. Yeah. And before then, it used to be sort of analog YUV cabling to vision switches and whatever it might be. And I saw a little bit about that, and I thought, what a ball ache this is. I'm glad I completely missed this. Same with tapes, right? I sort of missed the broadcast tape resolution. I just a little bit overlapped it, right? I did a little bit with digibeaters. I thought, God, tapes, what a pain in the arse. You know, I'm glad I've never had to be involved in any of this.
You're giving me a history lesson here. Carl, what's this tape thing about?
Oh, I see. Well, yeah. So obviously, broadcast up until even until a few years ago was very much tape driven. All of your content was on various different tape formats.
Yeah.
U-matic, Digibeta, BDSP, the very old school, big giant tape machines. They cost like 20, 30 grand each. You know,
wow.
They would require some very specialist engineering to keep them alive all the time. So your on-site maintenance guys were employed really to keep the operation running, because you had content on tapes. You could maybe play 1,000 hours of tapes before someone would take the lid off it and change something. Really expensive way of working. Fortunately, I only had a little bit of time in the world of that, and most of the early digital encoding systems, digital service systems had sort of come along when I came into broadcast. So I sort of rode the wave of not having to worry too much about it. And maybe that's what cloud is today. Maybe it's equivalent of me 20 years ago, not having to worry about maybe the next generation coming. We don't really have to worry too much about this SDI thing, because I'm in the cloud space, right? You know, let the old guys deal with that. They can keep it ticking over. So,
but you got a cross skill. You got to have the new who understand the cloud, and you got to have the people who understand SDI.
Yeah,
and because if we're doing all these hybrid approaches, who's actually managing that? If you don't have a knowledge set that applies to both types of technologies, where can that present challenges and problems?
I think, though, the technology is getting to a point where it's so divergent that I think from a technical point of view, to cross-skill would almost be, I wouldn't say impossible. You get people that are very interested in both, but I'd say it's tricky. You're using, in the cloud, your DevOps, your coding, your infrastructuring, your network debugging. When you go back down the stack in television, if you want to work in television, you go back into more production studio world, it's a whole set of new technology. Whereas before, when it was SDI, it's somewhat in the same space.
Yeah.
You know, we've added a whole new doubling of the challenge. I think that what the skills we need to see is not. There was this whole thing for years about convergence, IP convergence, old school engineering convergence of IP, and it's like, do we train network engineers to be broadcast engineers, or do we train broadcast engineers to be network engineers? I think the fact is, I think you don't worry about that. I think you have a brand new role, right? A brand new set of skills and a brand new. You're obviously going to get people that can do both that are going to go into that, but it's a whole new world. It'll be interesting going back to making television, telling a story, because I think the challenge is with some of the infrastructure technology that we really do need. They will have less exposure, I think, to making television and even just distributing television and the higher standards that meets. Because unless you've sat on the operational sharp edge of it not working, 2 in the morning on a night shift when you've got thousands of people phoning in and someone can't watch Britain's Got Talent or whatever it might be, and you see the urgency of needing to resolve these things, I think in an IT world, it is a bit more relaxed. There is a bit more like, what sort of SLA is that? 4 hours? 4 hours, is that right? It's like, no, 4 seconds, mate. You've got 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think that
even
those
4 seconds is a huge.
Yeah, exactly. I think those are the skills that I think make up our modern television people. But yeah, I don't know. It's such a wide scoping thing, and many people expect so much now to employ people in this industry. You've got to be storage expert. You've got to be a networking expert in coding, muxing, networks in video, a specialist in all these things, which I just don't think is even possible.
Do you think that's just a hurdle to get people in?
I think that's what people. I think they want to pay them 30 grand to do all those things, right? We want to pay you money and be a specialist of all these things. Where the reality of it is we probably need to recognise that actually some of these specialist jobs are quite complicated and do need more space and to be rewarded more for the skills and time they're going to put into their own education.
Are you saying there's a lot of people who are that multi-skilled, or people should focus on each individual skill?
I won't advise what people do, because I think what did I graduate with? I don't think I quite graduated with an HND. I think I missed the last bit because I went to go and work for Formula One. It seemed more exciting, so I didn't bother. Right. So I think that was the sum total of my college education, But I really love what I do, right? You know, like you said, I do it outside of work. I like to see how close I can get to making television output with the media, with the mediocre sort of costs that I can provide to buy a bit of kit. And it's quite interesting, right? You can get quite close, I think, personally. Still not quite there, but you can get quite close. But it's really down to the type of people. You know, you've got to be interested. You've got to want to understand television. You've got to understand what the technology is going to support it. You've got to be interested in the on-the-ground part, and you've got to be interested in what happens on the cloud. And when I mean the ground, I don't mean the technology. I mean the actual being at the event, helping people solve problems. Solving problems is what telly is all about, right? When it works great. It's about having people that can spin and solve problems through the entire stack. That said, I think there is an element of, I think it's now so vast that to have those skills at that troubleshooting level on one person or people is becoming quite tricky to do. And I think it's now building more trusted, not hierarchies, I don't use those words, more trusted handovers between what is more software defined and networking and cloudy and what's a little bit more supporting the production side, but being very, very well aware of each other's challenges and being, you know, well aware you're making television and it's got high tier, there's a lot of money behind it, right? Every second of television's got huge amounts of money behind them.
To build that trust and that collaboration, what would you like to see?
So, yeah, controversial statement is that our network and IT type skill sets, I think they really do need to be across a production and operational background of what we're actually trying to achieve. IT's IT, and we've employed lots of people from IT, and they do a great job of uptime. It's important to them as well. But I think having the element of what that really means to having a director on the ground that's trying to make some program with a challenge and needing that timely support, I think that's the type of skills I think I'd want to see that help us bridge the end-to-end of making television on the ground and operating it up in the cloud for distribution. You know,
if you take Pixar, for example, one of the things I was reading in Bob Iger's book, when he bought Pixar, met up with all the editors and all the Pixar guys there, and it was just like, I'm going to leave the creative decisions to you because you guys know best. If I was to then suddenly shift gears and change the way your workflow works, how you create that content, as a sort of business person, I don't necessarily know how you do that. I don't want to reorganize my organization in a way where I take away from the creatives who actually know how to do that. Parallel that to what you were saying, if you're bringing in engineers into sort of an outside broadcast environment, they need to have that production knowledge, also an understanding of how they would troubleshoot and how the challenges would work in the cloud environment too.
Yeah, we've got people that have come from an operational stroke production environment that very quickly can drop into many things that we do and end-to-end understand how to provide a solution from a upfront point of view or troubleshoot a challenge. We've got a number of people that over the years we've brought in that are very much, like just let's call them a generic software developer. These aren't specific people, by the way. We'd have great people that are great at lots of things, but in general, they're great. They're great at that, but it's taken us quite a long time, and they get there. They do get there, but it's taken quite a long time for them to truly understand what the software they're writing actually does, what the networks they're building actually does, why it's important to prioritise some developments over others, because it really does affect the on-the-ground operational person that has to operate it, thus supporting the production. And I think it's definitely a balance where we see people with production operational experience that are technical and engineering and designers. They understand the problems so much better for the customer, which means we can deliver better for the customer, support the customers better. And not saying the technical people we don't bring are really smart, and they absolutely are. And don't get me wrong, there's many things that we absolutely could not do that they do. But it's taken a long time to understand the domain that we're working in. And they're just not yet incumbent in the industry, we're having to bring those on board, and hopefully we are. We certainly are seeing lots of certainly in our Venus space. I mean, it's nothing but success, I think, on that front. We've got developers that really now do understand what we really want for our customers and bringing great developments along with that.
It's a pull and give kind of thing, because you want people that have the whole picture, but you don't have enough people, and you need to bring them in and get more.
Yeah, I don't think it's fill the gaps. I don't think
what do you do?
I don't think it's an easy answer, to be honest, and I don't think it's. I don't think I'm even framing the problem, to be fair. But I do think that having that end-to-end trust of the people understanding the thing you're trying to achieve is as a product, I think it's really, really important.
We've dabbled in the cloud. We mentioned our encoding and multiplexing platform. We mentioned hybrid approaches as well. Why did we create Cloud Media Connect?
So Cloud Media Connect is an evolution of our VMC products, and it was always going to be the next step. So VMC is predominantly an internet-provided platform, so we're using the public internet to provide an endpoint for our customers for a low-cost service. Cloud Media Connect was the evolution, really, so that we could use more managed networks with Amazon. A lot of our customers wanted to use the Direct Connect product from Amazon, and we were already working on something called Direct Connect Hosted, which is something we now support in our Vena platform. We can book our own Direct Connects into any account environment, so it's really cool. So we really moved VMC over to Cloud Media Connect. What we realised from our VMC platform is the good majority of our customers are effectively extending out our facility line service. So it's really having a facility line port or source and destination in the public, internet. We were now able to offer that in a more private space. And we are definitely seeing a lot of our broadcasters wanting to exchange content via Media Connect, which is AWS's ability to provide something called entitlements. And it really was quite a simple step for us. So we thought, well, why don't we just create a big, long virtual piece of wire between the facility line and the cloud and provide it an entitlement? And hey, presto, we've got a managed service that runs into the cloud that is actually very similar to what people already expect and understand. And that works really well. So that was one of the advantages of the cloud, where we could react quite quickly because the building blocks we had in place just naturally sort of slotted together, and actually kept a fairly consistent, old school way of working for our customers. And yeah, it's been very successful. People get it straight off the bat. It's they understand it. It's not very difficult to explain how it works, and it definitely provides a more managed service than our internet offering, where over the internet, our sort of current SLA is that, we don't really have one over the internet. Well, it's the internet. We see, its reliability has been amazing, but customers want to see some deterministic, they want to see a managed service, and CMC allows us to do that by providing deterministic direct connects that we can manage, we can own, and we can understand with AWS, and that's where CMC come from.
I'm going to have make a controversial comment here and say that some people may see BT as an old-fashioned telco. We have highly skilled engineers, to kiss your ass there, who understand the cloud and have worked in this new world. What have you needed to learn to upskill, and things like how to terraform?
Yeah, controversially, when I came to BT about 4 years ago, I thought it was an old farts line as well. And I had my eyes open to the world of service provision. It was actually my first service provider job. I've always worked for broadcasters, and it really has opened my eyes. But the skills, interestingly, the skills we brought in, we've all learned together. I've always said it. We will always be, and I've always believed that we will be experts in the cloud for our customers. And it just took getting the projects and the demand for us to be able to exercise that, to prove that. It was very clear that a good third of the team were just ready to go, right? They sat there, they've been playing with technology in their houses at 2 a.m, spinning their own stuff on the cloud. And it was very, very easy to take that team who were doing amazing things and give them the skills they needed. And things like infrastructure as code, which we talk about, Terraform is a big one. It's a big buzzword, but we really do use it, right? We really do try to provision our infrastructure as code, because it's the only way we're ever going to scale. And luckily, a lot of our work over in Vena as well, the teams that were working in that had used a lot of these skills to build that platform internally on-prem. And because these are very mobile techniques, it was like, it was just like, well, can you just do it over there instead? And it's like, yeah, no worries. Oh, they've done it. And those skills like terraforming, Ansible for configuration application, which is a bit of a different thing to Terraform. GitOps is really the big term that we use. That's having all of our sort of infrastructure as code in a managed source control, and being able to run Git runners, which are effectively just automated pipelines that do so many unbelievably complex things. They take a bit of code, we press a button, they'll run it off, they'll look at the code, then it runs through some stuff to look see if the code has got any security vulnerabilities in it before it even goes anywhere near applying it to anything on-prem or in the cloud. And there are people that can talk about this far better than I can, but fundamentally those skills are quite incremental and can be learned very quickly by people that have built that up over the last few years. And actually, when we started working a lot more in AWS, which is our main cloud platform that we're currently sort of spending a lot of time in, it was pretty easy. And also, we have the benefit of having teams. We already have cloud teams that work very closely with us that fill in all the gaps and make the quite scary stuff not quite that scary. So I go back to, I can say like Elon Musk, and I go back to the IP, it's not that hard. Terraforming infrastructure in the cloud, it isn't that hard, right? It's just having people that understand how to do it and having a team that's willing to upskill together. And it's great when you've got a team of young sort of like nerds and geeks, because they don't want to be outdone by each other, right? So someone will come in and do something really cool one day and they go, oh, that's a bit cool, isn't it? I better do something a bit cooler tomorrow. So that's how we upskill. We just have a great team of people that want to learn how to do these things and can challenge each other. And that's how we're building really good products in the cloud, I think.
Reminder for the edit. Put in Neil's intro. I'm going to sound like Elon Musk. IP's not hard.
It's true, though. It's not that hard.
What are some of the concerns when it comes to security in the cloud, then?
A lot of concerns, security in the cloud. And it's not really just the cloud. Forget the cloud. It is just security, whether it be in the cloud, on-prem, or wherever. We've definitely seen some examples of things that bog your mind sometimes.
Give me an example.
We've seen state actors take over various broadcast signals rights to sell their message, and that in some ways is just as damaging as nicking all your data or locking you out of it, right? And I'm not saying they're not bad things, but we are very much always under attack because we provide all of the connectivity for some major tier one broadcasters, and we're the ones that are going to get it all the time, right? And we do. The security buzzword is we're never secure, right? We can't be, because if we were secure, then we'd be lying, right? But what we are really good at doing is making sure that we are doing everything we possibly can with all the best tools and all the best experience and expertise to keep the what we have got secure. And I think security in the cloud is the same whether it be on the ground. We've just got to be constantly vigilant. It's always a concern, and it's always our primary. We burn so much development time on security, and it's a cost that we've never really fully been able to recognise on a bit of paper, right? It's a lot of time that we've got to add with a lot of costs. On the bottom line, looks quite scary. So we just somehow make that happen.
Well, it's like anything. If it, say you're developing a new product. You think, okay, it's going to cost X amount because I have to buy this equipment and it's going to take this much time, whatever. You got to count people's hourly wages as well. It's like, where's all those hidden costs coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I still think security is a cost that it's not even something we worry about, though, right? It's something which we just have to do because we know it's our business, and we spend a lot of time on our products. And it's frustrating sometimes, right? How much time we have to spend in this area. But I do, I can't think of, or certainly wouldn't want to mention too many areas of where we've had to exercise it because it's security, right? But I think we've done an amazing job with the security, and we've spent a lot of time building the relationships up with our other areas of BT around security, and about how we can just be constantly vigilant around it. But are we concerned about security in the cloud? I mean, AWS have a similar challenge, right? They just have to be secure. it is their business model, right? If they're not secure,
that's it.
Then you've lost the battle. So do we have to trust them? Yeah. Is it zero trust? Well, not really, but yeah, we really do have to trust them. But when I say trust them, I don't mean we trust them and not understand what we're doing. We have to spend all the time double, barricading and making sure that we've got the intelligence to understand how they work and audit them, right? We need to, we have to. There's lots of areas of AWS and their frameworks which are all around security, which are really good. But we really do have to audit them, right? We can't trust anybody, right? And that's an area which we need to get not better at, because we're good at it, but definitely need to grow skills on.
The future is cloud. The future might also be SDI in the short term. What's the future you'd like to see?
Oh, that's a good question. Certainly with the products and services that we're working with, the teams they're working on, I wouldn't say we're cloud all in, because obviously customers, may have very good reasons why building out some infrastructure is really good. And like I said before, it's not a problem, right? We can do that. But I think customers want us to run services for them in the cloud. We need to be the best at it. And I think that's where all my focus should be.
In terms of where the industry is going?
I think we shouldn't worry about too much about it, and just keep making television so that people can watch it and make good content. Which is, let's face it, is
just
where the money.
Take it day by day.
Take it day. Which is really where the money is, right? In the outside broadcast world, we can talk about it a lot, and there's some great experiments going on. But if we have to build an SDI, we have to build it. It doesn't matter. We pick the right technology at the right cost for the right job, and I think that's what we actually need to do.
Leave that for the visionaries.
Leave that for the vision engineers. Those jobbing engineers will do the best we can and wait for them to turn up with some cool stuff, yeah.
Cool. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for coming in today, Neil.
Thank you, Luke, as always, and I'll meet you down the pub where I will continue to drink under the table.
Yeah.